Okay.
Okay, we're starting the webinar now, and I see that attendees are coming into the webinar. Interesting thing about Zoom is that people get attended sometimes one at a time instead of in a mass scale, which I'm kind of accustomed to with GoToMeeting. But anyway, hope everybody's doing well. Hope you guys can hear me. My name is Rob Romanowski. I'm the Director of Sales Operations with 3HTI. And I'm joined today by our panelists, Jeff Gavio, our Director of Marketing, and most importantly, Anthony Garner, who is an applications engineer with PTC. And what we're going to do today is we're going to take you through a product in PTC's augmented reality Vuforia suite called Vuforia Studio. And what's really cool about Vuforia Studio is it's an augmented reality authoring tool that allows you to utilize the benefits of your current CAD data in an augmented reality setting, whether it's for a training purpose, for new hires, it could be used from a services standpoint for technicians in the field, and it also could be used for manufacturing. So this is really cool stuff. I'm excited about it. Everyone's going to be on mute during the webinar, by the way. So if you have any questions, type those into the chat box, and we'll try to answer them as we go. So right now I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to allow Anthony to take the con.
Okay. Thank you very much, Robert. So
You're welcome.
what I'm going to have us run through today is one, I'm going to show us a quick example of a fully built out augmented reality experience utilizing Vuforia Studio. Then we're going to go through a couple of slides explaining all the capabilities of it. And then lastly, we're going to go through what I like to call a hello world example of making a simplified version of the studio experience I'm about to show you, just to show you how easy it is to kind of scale up making things in that kind of environment. So first, let me go ahead and share my screen. This is going to be a mirror of my iPad, so I can actually show you the finished product I'm actually going to show you. So what I'm actually showing you here is essentially a snapshot of my organization's experience service. And what this is, oh, sorry, I didn't share it yet. There we go. And what this is, these are all the different augmented reality experiences that exist stored in my company server that I essentially have access to. And this is just one of the ways we have to share AR experiences. The other ways include publishing against a QR code so that anyone who has the QR code has access to the experience. Also the same thing for a URL. So alternatively, you can just print out a QR code and some sticky paper on a label and just stick it onto the object that you essentially want the experience to be referencing. So for this, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to come down here to this milling machine spatial target example. This is going to be a quick experience relating to a specific milling machine. And what we mean by a spatial target is I'm just going to find some flat place around me to drop this AR model within my actual environment. So for this one, we can see we have 4 different types of experience we can go through. We're actually going to go through the service experience. Okay, I'm just going to take 1 second to have to load up properly. Okay, and the first thing I'm just going to do is I'm just going to move my screen about just so it can acclimate, so computer vision can acclimate to the environment I'm placing this down in. Okay, that looks pretty stable to me. So now I'm just going to tap to place, and there is our augmented reality model, which is based on this milling machine CAD, which of course also means that this AR model is as detailed as the actual CAD itself. So every individual nut, bolt, or part of that actual CAD assembly is available for me to essentially drive my AR experience. So what we see here is our temperature gauge on this actual milling machine. That is a smart connected temperature gauge that's reading that information through our IoT platform ThingWorks. So anything that's being read on that smart connected sensor can essentially be routed into this augmented reality experience and used to drive actions within it. So in this case, in this specific simulation, we have a temperature that's reading above a certain threshold, and that's going to initialize this experience we're going to go through, which is going to help us cool down this milling machine. In order to actually start our experience, I'm just going to press on this pinger on my iPad here. And we do that, it's going to open up a quick troubleshooting guide, going to have us do two specific actions. So a motor's overloaded, a reduce load on motor, air circulation through the motor is restricted, clean out the motor. We're going to presume that we've done those two steps already. So the third step, to inspect the motor brushes and replace them if necessary, that's going to be the animation sequence that we're about to go through here. So if we click on continue, we're going to be presented with the buttons that are going to be used to control the animation sequence for this specific experience here. So if I click on this play button right here, it's going to take us step by step through this procedure in order to essentially cool down this issue that we're having with this milling machine. So first step it's going to have us is disconnect the mill from power. And in case we don't see that initially, it's going to have that highlight red for us. Next step is we're going to locate the cap on the top of the motor housing. Again, if I am a newer hire, I don't necessarily have the best understanding of what it's actually talking about. There, it's going to have us highlight red for us. So now we're going to place that screwdriver into the motor cap. I'm going to turn that screwdriver clockwise to loosen the cap. I'm going to remove that spring in that carbon brush, and we're going to replace that with a brand new one. So we're going to reinsert that cap into the motor housing. We're going to turn that screwdriver clockwise to tighten the cap. After that operation is complete, we're going to get a new live up-to-date reading from that sensor within our milling machine, and then it's going to have us enter our name in for maintenance verification, so we can keep track of who's done this specific procedure in this specific a specific piece of equipment, so we can get some more high-level analytics about why this keeps having this specific type of issue based on how many times someone had to go in and fix it. Okay. So that was just a brief view of like a finished experience. I always like showing that first just to get your mind around some of the possibilities that can be done with Vuforia Studio before I show you just a very basic Hello World example. But now I'm actually going to go into my PowerPoint here, just a quick few slides just to introduce all of the concepts before we go directly into our Hello World example. So I'll switch over to here. So first thing I always like to do is just to introduce the challenges that have prompted PTC to develop the solution. And a lot of these tend to resonate with our customers when we're actually going through them. So one of the bigger ones is just an overall increase in the complexity of the services and the systems that people have to work with in the manufacturing context, and the actual information being, I'll say, transferred to both new hires and just expanded out becomes much difficult to keep up with. Another big thing is overall just a widening skill gap as older people with much more experience on the actual machines are starting to retire. The newer people or the actual contractors who are coming in to essentially replace them don't have the same knowledge, and it becomes a much bigger lift to actually get them up to speed and thus getting your operations, your systems back up to speed. And overarching, there's now just a growing demand and a much higher need to differentiate yourself from your actual competitors as we now compete in a much more globalized marketplace with a lot of advanced technology going around. And at the end of the day, you have to give your customers a reason to go with you as opposed to going with your other customer who's providing possibly a lower price point for a higher amount of quality or higher amount of service. The solution that PTC has developed and is continuously developing for these specific issues and other ones is the Vuforia Studio suite. And what you actually see here is one Vuforia Studio, which is the, I'll say, the environment or the platform that's allowing you to develop these very rich augmented reality experiences, and much more importantly, publish them and scale them out to your entire enterprise. So after I've created a augmented reality experience, because of that publishing either to my company's experience server or to a QR code or URL, I can get that out to my entire company or even my customers if I need to, essentially getting them scaled out as quickly as possible. And the way that our customers or internal people are actually going to view that is through Vuforia View, which is a freely downloadable app, which is going to let you scan the QR codes or URLs or have access to the experience service to bring those AR experiences down. That's essentially the app that I was just using on my iPad to actually go through that experience we were just looking at. So some of the main capabilities of Studio is one, it lets you train in or out of context. And what we mean by in context is one of the capacities with Vuforia Studio is to create what we refer to as a model target. And what a model target means is we take the actual real world object and we overlay the augmented reality experience over the actual real world object so that all the animations and all the informations and all of the I'll say data points that are coming from it are done directly within the context of the real world object. So if you're working on, say, a RealWear device or a HoloLens device or some form of wearable, which is also utilizable with Vuforia Studio, you can essentially work, I'll say, live and in context of the actual option there. What we mean by out of context is what we just saw there with a spatial target, where I just drop down a AR model somewhere within my space to work on that without the risk of potentially damaging the real world object before I'm actually ready. So if you can imagine that, you can put that QR code on some training documentation or in learning management software for someone to work on before they actually work on a real world object itself. And the biggest part of Vuforia Studio is the efficient creation of augmented reality instruction. So whereas creating AR before usually required some developer environment with some knowledge in, I'll say some high level knowledge in coding, with Vuforia Studio, you can arm your um, subject matter experts, your engineers, the people responsible for your learning management. You can arm them with the knowledge of Vuforia Studio, and then they can create these augmented reality experiences and deploy and rapidly iterate out into the entire corporation or in the entire group. And another big thing, like I was talking about before, is you can leverage Internet of Things data or IoT data for further insight for any of our experiences. So utilizing our IoT platform ThingWorks, anything that's being read on that edge device, as we like to call it, can essentially be incorporated into the AR experience. So you can get live feedback about how your actions or interactions with the actual object is affecting its overall performance or any of the actual measurements or ratings on it, on the object itself.
Hey, Anthony.
Yes, sir.
So on the slide before the last slide that you showed, just real quick to touch on something in the next one.
Oops, sorry.
So go up to train in, train out of context. That's it. So just this picture here that's a part of the slide is from a video from BAE Systems, and what this worker is doing is assembling a battery that's being used for a train, and this worker is able to go through the step-by-step process in creating this battery, in building and manufacturing this battery. And if she makes a mistake or goes out of sequence, the system will alert immediately that she missed a step and needs to go back and change something, which is like really cool. So, like Anthony said in the demonstration, you're able to create these augmented reality experiences, and whether it's because of a skills gap or you want to make have better training retention with employees and workers, or if it's because you're losing people due to the silver tsunami because they have this tribal knowledge that they know how to do their job very effectively and efficiently over the years. Um, and you want to be able to capture that and be able to pass that along. This is where Vuforia Studio will help in those instances. And also from a training standpoint, we've seen with the PTC customers that there is a higher retention of employees from having such as higher level of training, and also the learning curve increases like 300%. Like it's ridiculous how much more people retain from using the AR capabilities of Vuforia Studio than just going through training from a regular manual that may have 2D or 3D images. So I just wanted to point that out because I really like this BAE video. I think it really hits the nail on the head when it comes to what the capabilities of augmented reality from a manufacturing and training standpoint.
Thanks very much, Rob.
That's my 3.5 cents.
So now what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to go into what I refer to as our hello world example, because one of the main driving ideas behind Vuforia Studio is not only can you create these very rich and very engaging augmented reality experiences that drive that training retention very easily, but it's also much, much more easier on the actual development side to make these and ultimately scale them out. So let me go ahead and switch over here. So this is our Vuforia Studio, the actual development environment for Vuforia Studio. And here I've first gotten to my project. So these are all the different projects that my group or my company has essentially made for these augmented reality experience. So it's very easy for me to come back to any one of these and make any additional changes to that project as I need to. But for this one, we're actually going to create an entirely brand new project by clicking on this green plus button to the top right. And when we do that, it's going to proc us to make a template or utilize a template, either a 2D eyewear, a 3D eyewear, or a mobile template. So this is also deployable on wearables, tablets, or phones, pretty much whatever device your end users have on hand. For this one, we're just going to select a mobile default. We're going to give this a new project name, define our experience service URL down there, which is how we're going to have our view app point to the right service to actually grab these. Okay. So after we've done that, we're actually going to enter into the developer environment proper. And here, this is where we can actually see the actual studio space where we're actually going to be making these. So here, we're just going to do some quick configurations just to make our life a little bit easier. Define our theme editor for our end user to be dark. Here under our experience, this is where we can actually define if you want to utilize a thing mark. And what a thing mark is essentially just a PTC branded QR code that assists a little bit with the scaling of objects. So essentially the scale between the augmented reality object and the thing mark is locked. So if I place this onto a piece of paper, it's always going to be the exact same size whenever it's initially scanned. And here under info, again, we're just going to validate that our experience service is fully running. We're going to define whether or not we want this to be either public or require someone to actually sign on before they're actually be able to view this experience. Define our minimum width to be phone, so it's deployable easily on phone or tablet. And last thing I'll show you here is these are what actual thing marks look like. So it's a very easy to print these out on a label and again, stick them onto actual object in your environment, or to just copy them and put them on a learning manual if you need to. So now that we've taken that quick tour, what we're actually going to do here is go out to Creo Illustrate, and this is the actual tool we're going to be using to make the animation sequence itself. So for this one, it's going to be another quick example on our milling machine. We're just going to do a really quick 3-step process. So for here within Creo Illustrate, all we're going to do is directly interact with the objects within the actual space here, and then we're going to record those as the keyframes for our animation sequence. So in this case, all we're going to do is we're going to highlight the power cable. We're going to highlight the cap on the motor housing again. Then we're going to bring in a screwdriver and a directional arrow. We're going to show that turning, and then we're going to fade out that screwdriver to directional arrow and the cap on the top of the motor housing. Okay. And of course, as I'm doing all of this, these are all being captured as keyframe animation sequences within my Creo Illustrate. Okay, so now we're going to do that. We're going to have this all fade out. And then I'm just going to do a quick preview of the sequence before we publish. Okay, and that all looks good to me. So now what we're going to do is we're going to publish this as a PVZ file, which is just a product view zip file, which is going to compress both the CAD model as well as the animation sequence that we've just done for it to be imported into Vuforia Studio. So now that we've done that, we're going to switch back over to Vuforia Studio. We're going to drop down a spatial target, and that's going to define the actual spatial relationship between the target we're going to use to proc the experience and the actual 3D model itself. So we're going to drag in that spatial target, and then we're going to drag in our model augmentation, which is going to be the thing that essentially defines the relationship between the two. And then we're going to associate the PVZ file that we've just made with um, the model augmentation that we're just bringing in. So when we select that file, it's going to give us the option of running the CAD optimizer. So that's going to create a high fidelity, low fidelity, and medium fidelity version of our PVZ file for us to use whichever one works best for our end user. And there, that is our CAD model that we're going to be utilizing. And also I have the ability to choose what animation sequence I want to essentially be proc for this actual procedure here, which means if I do have multiple animation sequences, I can save them all into the PVZ file and make use of all of them for our experience. Next step here is we're actually going to go into our 2D canvas, and this is where we create our buttons and our labels that are just shown two-dimensionally within our experience. And right here, I'm just going to do some quick formatting work just to make sure everything's nice and neat the way I'm going to need to go about it. Okay, so everything's nice and centered, and these are going to be the spaces that we're actually going to bring into our buttons to run our experience here. So we're going to bring in two specific toggle buttons. And we can also define if we want to use a PNG image that we have stored on our computer locally as our image, or we can just go with a stock image that we have within Vuforia Studio itself. So essentially any PNG image can be used as a button or pretty much anything else within Vuforia Studio. And also in Studio, we have like a full CSS editor. So if you want to, I'll say make the Studio experience match your company style guide, so long as you have the CSS code, you have that capacity. So now this is the actual part when usually in another development environment, you have to go and do some hard, maybe mid to low level coding or actually create the functionality of these buttons driving the animation sequence within our actual experience. Within Vuforia Studio, all I need to do is come under these pre-created JavaScript events for click, pressed, and unpressed. We're going to drag that clicked event over onto our model here. That's going to go ahead and associate that button with one of these specific pre-built out actions. So what I want this to do is rewind this one step in the keyframe. So I'm going to do select rewind and then bind. And now that button is our rewind button for our animation sequence. And here I'm just going to do the exact same thing for our play button right here. So defining the image that we want to use for that, defining the CSS color we also want to utilize. Then going under our click event, we're going to drag that over to our model one again, and then we're going to have this select as our play button. And mainly Vuforia Studio is built very much around that very easy drag and drop kind of interface without having to do a lot of that low level coding in order to add some of that very basic functionality. And here I'm going to do the exact same thing to add in the IoT gauge for our experience here, just to wrap everything up. So here I'm just going to bring in an IoT gauge augmentation or IoT gauge widget. We're going to drag it so it's easily viewable for our end users. And then we're going to go out to our data pane here and click on our external data. We have also a ThingWorks instance that's running in the same server. So anything that's being read into that ThingWorks instance is available for us to bring over into our augmented reality experience here. Here in this case, I'm going to grab this milling machine data simulator thing. Under the properties of that thing, we have our temperature reading that's being read on our actual object here. We're going to click on the plus, and that's going to bring that into our data pane. And then as you see, it has that arrow with the parentheses, which means it's draggable and associatable with something within our studio experience. Then I'm going to just drag that temperature over to the text of our gauge. So now that the text of our gauge is going to read whatever the temperature reading of that milling machine is. So lastly, we're going to do here is we're just going to go ahead and quickly preview our sequence. So this is what it's going to look like for our end users on an iPhone 6, 7, or 8, say for instead of that blank gray and white environment, they're going to see their own environment and see the model being dropped down into that. And here we can actually blow that up to see what it looks like for an iPad. And then we can click on the play button to run through the actual animation sequence that we created there. We can see the information being read live from that smart IoT gauge from the ThingWorks instance. And just a few other notes kind of to wrap this up. So if I wanted to, I can just go ahead and publish out this experience so that anyone who has the QR code, the URL associated with it has that experience. And that also means I can go ahead and unpublish it if I need to make any certain changes, then make the changes and republish it. And then they're going to have access to the most up-to-date version. And I would like to say Vuforia Studio is a low code as opposed to a no code kind of system. So if you do have skills in JavaScript or CSS, you can extend the functionality of Vuforia Studio quite a bit utilizing that. But as of right now, I could essentially just publish this entire experience for end user, and they'll have this pretty much within pretty much seconds of it being done. And that's our, I'll say, quick hello world example of how easy it is to build something with Vuforia Studio. And of course, this is a very basic example. The sky's pretty much the limit for the type of experiences you can make for essentially different situations, so long as you have the CAD to drive these kind of augmented reality experiences. So I'll stop here and just like see if we have any questions in the queue that we need to get to.
Good job, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and share my screen as we wrap up. I know how to do this. I've done it before. There we go. Well, I want to thank everybody for being on today. If you have any questions, or maybe you want more of a specific demo based on a product that you're making, that you're manufacturing, and we're more than happy to do that for you, to give you more of a custom look at how this would work for you and your organization. If you feel that way, if you'd like to see it, contact us. You can email me directly. You can email us at info@3hti.com, or you can just reply to the email invitation that was sent to you. If you reply to those emails, they come directly to me. So want to thank Anthony for his time today and take us through an excellent demo. Thank everybody for attending. We are under the 30-minute mark, which is great. So we're going to end the webinar here, be dismissed. I want to thank everybody for being on again, and have a great day.
Yep, everyone have a good one.
Take care.